fantastic show lined up for you today. We are being joined again by our good friend Barry from Western New York, who's back for a third visit, and he's got more stories to tell, and I can't wait to hear them, so buckle up. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an epic show ahead, but just remember, if any of you have experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can either email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com or head over to paranormalportal.net. Scroll down and find the button that says Interview Me, and that'll allow you to look at a calendar of possible times and dates and find a date that works for you. Love to hear your stories, so definitely get in touch with me. Hey Barry, how you doing? Thanks for coming back, man.
Thank you for having me again. And boy, who would ever think I'd be here again? But I'm very excited to be here.
Well, you know, it's a theme that I've ran into so many times. Is that everyone seems to have a story, you know, whether or not they choose to tell it, but it's surprising the amount of people that have had many stories. And we've had repeat visits several times here on the show. But much like myself, I've had a lot of different experiences of my own. And so I guess it's good to know that there are people like me and like us out there that are, you know, so there's nothing wrong with us. It's just some people seem to be more prone to experiencing this stuff, but it's just been an incredible journey so far hearing from you, and I know we've got a lot more ground to cover, but yeah, I mean, the repeat experiences are not at all unusual in this.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the things that's so great about your show is that you know what it's like to have experiences. Mm-hmm. And so therefore you can relate to people that come onto the show in a trusting way, you know, and be able to openly communicate and talk about things that are very hard to talk about. It's very isolating for a lot of people to go through such things. And then you try to, you're like, who can I talk to? Who can I say something to? Of course, I'm telling the world everything right now. You know, it's been a struggle through the years. You know, even as a kid, I started to realize that I was not able to just openly talk about a lot of the stuff. So we kind of kept it quiet and shared stories between my siblings and I, or maybe a very close friend. Occasionally I would say something to. Yeah. But, you know, even dealing with family members, it's hard for some people, if they never experienced anything, to sit there and look at you and go, is this real? But, you know, luckily I have a good family, loving family that supports me and, you know, puts up with me. But, and I mean, they've shared, so in my immediate family has shared many, you know, experiences along with me. So, and that's what some of the good things is that I have had shared experiences with people. So it makes me realize that it isn't just me. And so anybody diagnosing me right now, listening to this program, you know, I think I'm, you know, pretty of sound mind, but the stuff is going to get it a little far out here, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and that's pretty much par for the course with this stuff because we're dealing with a bucket full of unknowns. But now last time you were on, we talked a lot about your childhood growing up through the formative years and into your adulthood. So where are you taking us today?
Well, I thought, you know, one of the things that I would talk about is haunted workplaces. And, you know, again, if there's a ghost or something going on, I will pick up on it, or they pick up on me. I'm not sure. I'll get hit on by a ghost. I don't know about that, but it sounded kind of weird the way I said that. But I will notice something's going on, and if there's something happening, it seems so. I thought I had a few interesting stories to tell about some of my workplaces, and including that I've had some very interesting jobs through the years. So,
oh, absolutely. Love to hear it.
as you know.
Yeah. Yep. By all means, take us away, sir.
All right. So, back in the 1990s, I had moved to Florida, and I got a job, which was a dream job for me because I mentioned, I think that I'm an artist and, and so this job was to make museum figures for museums. Oh, did I just say museum figures? Well, hello. So it was a museum company that, on one side, they moved down from, into Florida to set up shop, and they got a big warehouse. And these were old warehouses that, I found out were built in the 1940s.
Oh, wow.
And the place that we moved into was a former orange juice processing plant just south of the city. And, of course, none of the orange, orchards were around anymore. But at one point in time, there was a train, tracks that ran near this processing plant. And, so they would, harvest the oranges, process them into juice and other products, condensed juice and so forth. And then they would load up the train and the tankers with the product and ship it around the country or wherever. From what I understand. So we had, not that, making wax museum figures was creepy enough as it is. So we move into this creepy warehouse, and the company shipped down all these old museum figures and props and things. So we've got this warehouse space, this is all a new crew of people. For the first time, I got in there at the ground level at this job, which was a great, long time career for me, ended up being. But we moved in, and we noticed the place was kind of quirky and weird, but didn't think too much about it. And then some odd things started to happen, and sometimes there was a mezzanine, and the people that working below it would hear footsteps walking around, and they would think it's one of us workers that are out on the floor, and they look out, and we're all accounted for, and they're hearing these footsteps. And they mentioned that a number of times, and I didn't think too much about it, but I thought it was interesting.
Right.
One day I was working on a big work table, and there was a coworker on the other side of the table doing some work. And this is so crazy. It was a human, it's a leg, but it was not a real leg. It was a leg that was made for a museum figure. So the size of a human leg is laying on a table that I was working on. And the thing flew off the table and landed about 10, 12 feet across the room in front of us.
Oh my God.
And we were both just kind of in shock. And my coworker looked at me and was like, "Did you see that?" I was like, "The leg fly across the room? No." And, it's kind of one of those things. And, we were like, "Oh my gosh, this place is," we couldn't explain it. There's no, there was some weight to this object. It weighs several pounds, I'm going to guess, and to have it fly across the room and then hit the floor, I wasn't happy about it either, but we were startled, to say the least.
Yeah, that's profound.
So we started making jokes that somebody fell into the vat and got, crushed into pulp, and, just the orange juice ghost or whatever, kind of thing. But it was an unnerving place to go, especially if you were in there by yourself. It was just had this, it was old, had a weird vibe to it. Right. I didn't see any real, I never saw another thing like that happen, but you got the feeling that you weren't alone in there at times. Yeah. And, of course, having, like I said, museum figures all around there, everywhere you look, there's if you move a figure, you could scare your own self, in there. But something that did happen that I thought was interesting was one day I was in there by myself. It must have been on a weekend, I guess, on a Saturday working. And I had a bay door opened up, and an elderly man came walking up and was looking inside the workplace, and it startled me. The man was he was tall, very, very elderly gentleman, though. And when I asked him if I could help him, he answered me in what sounded like a German accent. And he said, "No, I was just here looking. I was here when this building was built." And I was like, "Oh, when was that?" And he told me 1940s, sometime early 1940s.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "Oh, you want to come in and take a look?" And he just said, "Oh, I remember, they were making orange juice or whatever here," and so forth. And that was that was it as far as the interaction with the gentleman. He didn't tell me too much else, but I thought it was kind of unusual and interesting. I was like, who was that guy? I went back to work, but later on, the owners of the property decided they wanted to add another new building to the property. And they began getting ready to do some construction. And when they did, they came across human bones. And I came to work one day, and I see their forensic people or the crime scene people or whatever there out on the property, and at the construction site where they were digging. And I ended up asking the owner of the property what was going on, and he said, well, they found a skeleton, and they believe it was from a German prisoner of war.
Whoa.
Now, first of all, a German prisoner of war? What? I've never even heard of such a thing.
Oh, yeah, no.
Well, after he told me that, I eventually went and looked this up, and in Florida, first of all, it said, I read that there were over 400,000 German prisoners of war from 1942 to 1945, and they shipped them all here to the United States, which they did not do a lot of press coverage for this.
Right.
But this was our America's labor force at that point in time, because all of our men were out fighting in a war, and so they needed to fill this gap.
Oh.
And apparently there were over 10,000 of them here in Florida.
Oh.
So they were the ones picking the oranges. They built the building, the warehouses that, this plant was. So it was interesting, So I'm like, I should have been speaking in German, like, sprechen Sie Deutsch. I could have had communication with this ghost, but
right.
I thought it was very interesting.
That's amazing. That's very amazing. And when this person appeared to you, it looked just as manifest as you and I.
Yeah, now I didn't think about that. But I believe he was a survivor.
Oh, okay.
He was elderly, very elderly man.
Okay, so you don't think he was an apparition then?
No,
okay.
But he was, to make things clear for everybody.
Okay.
Thanks for doing that. I believe he was a survivor and somehow ended up back in Florida. And,
okay.
Or, I don't know, after the war, he might have been like, hey, I want to move back to that place. That was paradise. So they got oranges growing on trees.
Yeah.
And I will say this much. The German prisoners of war, surprisingly, were treated very well by America. They were part of the Geneva Convention.
Yep.
Where they were actually paid. I mean, it's kind of shocking. It probably would really get a lot of people angry to think that here these German prisoners of war were being paid wages, which, I don't know, it's probably not money per se, but maybe credits so they could buy cigarettes and whatever. But they were housed, fed, and paid some kind of wages of some kind.
Okay.
So, it was interesting. But yeah, so this man looked like he was, in his 90s, although he's quite a tall gentleman for his age. I mean, very old. So,
Okay.
And I suppose if that happened back in the 1940s, that he was there, he had to be really old. It was in the 90s when this, he visited when I was working there.
Sure. Yeah. And during World War II, enlistment age could be 17 or maybe even younger for the German side. Who knows?
Yeah, sure. Of course. So, it was, that was interesting. I thought in itself. And then to top everything else off that was going on there, we had in the warehouse right next door to the art department was where this museum company that I worked for had all their artifacts and items for their museums stored. And they had a lot of very unusual antiquities, to say the least, in that place. And, it's funny. There were many times when I would get a very odd feeling when I was in there. And actually, at times, I would physically become ill around some of the stuff. There were a lot of tribal artifacts, a lot of human remains, mummies, and other, skulls of different time periods. There was weapons of all time periods and all cultures in there. Swords, Japanese, samurai. There were Civil War items. So you got all these different things in one place, which really, can you imagine the type of energy that would be creating there? And it took me a long time to kind of come to this conclusion that when I would be in there for any length of time around certain things, where I would start to feel dizzy, get kind of nauseated, sometimes break out in sweats, or something would happen where I would feel like I need to get out of that area. But so I did start to feel like there was something going on. But every time I turned around, a truckload of stuff would come, and they'd be like, "Hey, can you help me unload something? Can you, unpack some things?" One time, a coworker and I were opening some crates up, and they were wooden crates, and they had that packing material. It looks like kind of like hay. I don't know what they call it. I can't remember.
Okay.
Anyways, you know what I'm saying. It was like this was like a scene from a horror movie here, where we were opening these mysterious crates up, and I opened this crate up, and inside the crate the tag said, "Witch Doctor's Trophy Skull," or something like that. And I think this was from like the Dayak tribe. It's from some crazy place. But the skull, which was very ominous looking, was highly decorated with monkey skulls and boar's tusks and feathers. Mm-hmm. And this is some crazy hoodoo, voodoo, whatever magical item from something. And on the side of the head, you could see where there was this person at one point in time was hit and struck in the head, and there was a hole where by probably a stone weapon or some kind of a weapon. So this is an antique item, by the way, collectible, or somehow it became a collectible item and ended up in the museum hands. But when I opened it up, I looked at my coworker, and he's looking at me, and of course, I've always been very curious about interesting and unusual items. So anytime I had a chance to get my hands on a Tibetan skull bowl or a carved or shrunken head or something, I would be really interested in looking at these items.
Sure.
But not realizing that they held so much energy. I didn't think of that. Mm-hmm. So the coworker looks at me and goes, "I bet you don't dare stick your finger in that hole, in that skull," right? And what do? Being a dumb young guy, sure. I go and stick my finger in this hole. And he looks at me and goes, "Dude, you're cursed, I start thinking about it like, why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. I'm like, well, if you don't believe it, then nothing's going to happen, kind of a thing. But it did kind of bother me a little bit when I start thinking about it, like I gotta not do stupid stuff, like that. Well, interestingly, I went to go to see a psychic at a place called Casadega here in Central Florida area. Mm-hmm. And Casadega is a spiritualist camp. And where I grew up in Western New York was a place called Casadega, New York, up in that area. Right. There was a place it's called Lilydale, and they were connected. And the one here in Florida was like the summer retreat. Or the winter retreat, for this spiritual camp. And they go back to the 1800s, spiritualists.
Oh, neat.
So, I went there to get a reading. Now, being that I grew up having a grandmother who was a very gifted psychic, and they called her a clairvoyant, but she, I think, had more than one ability. But I think back then they called a clairvoyant the same a replacement name for a psychic, but she did have multiple abilities, and I talked about her in a previous episode. Well, I went to this psychic, and I thought, I'm not going to tell this person anything. If they start fishing for information, I'm like, if I'm going to pay money, I'm not going to reveal everything and spill the beans and tell them everything about myself.
Right.
So I was going to remain very quiet about things and try to get them to tell me something. And the woman looks at me almost immediately, and she's like staring at me, and she goes, "Are you in the antiques business?" Oh. And I looked at her and I went, "No, I am not in the antiques business." She looks back at me with this interesting look on her face, and she goes, "That's interesting, because I see you handling some very, very unusual antiquities." And she's like, "I got to ask you again, why would I see you handling such unusual antiquities?" And I just, all of a sudden it dawned on me, hello, unusual antiquity. Oh yeah, that's my job. I work for this, museum company, and, we're always moving unusual antiquities, right?
Yeah.
And so I went, oh yeah, it's from my work. I said, yes, there's a lot of unusual. And she looked at me and goes, "There's a lot of really dark energy attached to many of those items I see you holding in your hands." She said, "You are a sensitive, and you really need to be careful about these objects that you're holding." She said, "Some of them are very dark," and so she gave me this warning,
mm-hmm.
to be careful. And she says, "I wouldn't be surprised if some of these things affect you when you're," I said, "Oh, yeah, I think I've actually, one time I picked up a skull. It actually was engraved with all this medieval magic stuff on it. I mean, this thing was probably going back to the 1300s or something in Europe, and it had all kinds of no offense to anybody who was practices anything. Hey, I'm just telling you what I had in my hands, mm-hmm. is this skull from the, Middle Ages. It was carved with all kinds of mystical mm-hmm. stuff on it.
Right.
I picked it up, and I almost instantly got ill and began gagging, and went out. I had to run out of the building, and was having dry heaves, and felt very like I was going to pass out or something. Wow. And so, I realized that, okay, I need to be careful. So I thought, well, I wonder if I put rubber gloves on, would that make a difference? Or, or maybe I'll just try to lighten up on the curiosity factor that, I'm drawn to seeing all these things, even though I know that there's some morbid, but I love history. I love cultures and ancient, things and so forth. And, always been interested in mummies and stuff, typical. I'm a grown man, but I'm like a kid in that way, that curiosity and interest is still there. But I thought, okay, I'm going to listen to what this lady says. Within a week of that conversation, a truck comes in. Hey, can you help us unload this truck? Okay. And I'm moving a bunch of stuff in, big objects, furniture, stuff. And there was this big car from the it looked like late 40s, early 50s, this huge tank of a car, And they asked me if I would get inside it and help steer the car while they pushed it into the building. So I'm in this car and I roll the window down. I'm like, so what's the story with this car? And they go, oh, that was Lee Harvey Oswald's car that he drove to, when he, assassinated Kennedy.
Oh my God.
So I suddenly realized I'm not just touching an object.
Yeah.
I am enveloped inside this object,
Oh, geez.
and, I will tell you, that I still have dreams, even though I've been, I worked for the company for 17 years. I still have dreams about the warehouse, and, the dreams are almost, they vary, but it's almost always me being locked in the warehouse at night, which is weird. And, it's a strange, repetitive type dream. There's always something unusual going on. They're not, all out nightmares, but they're also not, fun. And there always feels like, how am I here? Why am I here? And how do I get out of here kind of a thing. And, I'm surrounded by all this unusual stuff. I mean, so, that was an interesting, experience, for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. That's crazy. And I can't imagine the intensity of those energies and, just knowing there was that much history. I mean, my God, you could pick up a hairbrush and get an attachment. I mean, it's just one of those things that's not uncommon in this, but when you're talking about items with such a dark or turbulent history from turbulent times and my God, that's just intense. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm glad you made it out of there.
Yeah, actually, and I just remembered that I actually went in there with an EVP device before moving on from the company. I was curious and I bought a little meter.
You mean EMF? You mean EMF or EVP?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, EMF.
Okay.
Meter. Yeah,
gotcha.
Yes, thank you. And of course, I had bought this thing kind of on a whim, really, online. But I thought, well, I'm going to walk through there and see if anything happens. And I went in there. I was by myself, and I walked around, and there was about, out of all the stuff, and there's so many interesting things, there were about 4 or 5 items that really made the device go crazy. And there was no wiring around them or anything like that. They were, and these were organic items. They were not electronic items. There was nothing plugged in or anything like that. So, it's interesting that these specific items, and one of them was the witch doctor's skull.
Oh,
yeah. It was very intense, and it was sitting there on a shelf, and that thing really, had some energy attached to it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Another thing that had a lot of energy was a Civil War cannonball.
Oh.
And it's kind of weird. I wouldn't have expected it, but whatever reason, that thing really, that was a metal object, but why it would have that kind of energy, I don't know. But then again, we don't know how many people did that cannonball kill? Maybe,
Right.
or just the fact it was in a Civil War battle site. Anything that was there could have picked up energy. So there you go with that one.
Yikes!
And then this was really interesting. There were shrunken heads, and one of them was bearded, and this thing really went crazy. So, and I can't remember what, I think there was some other weapon of some type. I mean, there was so much stuff. There was African hate god totems and things in this warehouse. There was just a lot of, native, indigenous, artifacts and aboriginal masks and so forth. So there's so much stuff, but there were, like I say, a handful of items that really made, the device go crazy.
Wow.
And so I took that with me. I wasn't out looking for, I was not a professional paranormal investigator or anything.
Sure.
To this day. I'm a guy who lots of stuff happens to. Yeah. Although I'm interested in becoming more of maybe an investigator, and I'm studying parapsychology at the moment because I want answers to things. But at the time, this is brand new. I just bought this device. I'm going to take it in there and kind of walk around, and to my surprise, well, maybe not really to my surprise, but, I could see that something really was happening. So I wanted to have a witness to see this, So I asked one of the guys that worked with me, worked for the company, to come with me sometime and bring a camera to film. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't available at that time, but we about a week or two, I think it was actually wasn't for a couple more weeks, we went back in there, and he followed me around, and the same items again did the same type of thing.
Wow.
My son was with me that day. He was just a kid, why I would bring my kid into this place, I don't know. Bad dad. Yeah. Sorry, kid. But he was with me that day, and happened to be the day that guy was able to come along in there. So we went in there, and I began asking some questions, like yes or no questions, and yes, make the meter go, and no, don't, or I don't know, I'm trying to come up with a way to communicate in some way.
Yep.
And I don't know how much the communication you could have with a shrunken head, but I swear it seemed like we were getting a response from I'm telling this story. We were getting a response from a shrunken head, but you think about this. This was once a human being, a living human being,
right,
who was killed by a Javaro Indian in the Amazon rainforest, and part of their then they go through this ritual that takes a couple of weeks to do this ritual of shrinking the human head.
Right. And
the whole purpose is to capture the soul of their enemy into this, what now becomes a trophy to them. I mean, it is a very bizarre and, ritual that they've done. And the whole point of it is to capture not only kill their enemy, but then to capture their soul, which is very bizarre,
very dark too. Yeah, I mean that's a very, I don't know. It seems malicious. I mean, obviously, malice is a stupid word, but I mean, it's like an evil thing.
Yeah, the intent is very great. Now, I've read. I mean, this kind of gets really deep here. I'm sorry if it offends people or stuff, but you're on the Paranormal Portal here, so you should be sure. So, I mean, but there are stories of, tribes that have cannibalized other, peoples and stuff, and sometimes in a ritualistic way of conquering those people that they, been to battle with. They will, do such things and so forth. Yeah. So, there's a history of bad behaviors and dark behaviors throughout history of humans doing things to others. But this is a strange thing. You like wonder, how did they come up with the idea of shrinking a head in the first place? You know, how did that happen? And again, it's quite a process. It takes a few weeks. They do a lot of chanting and ritual stuff while they're doing this and so forth. And so, you know, it's not a terrible surprise to think that these things could be haunted. I would want one in my house. But as a kid, I grew up reading the you know, monster magazines and the comic books, and ordered the rubber shrunken head in the back of the comic book, you know, and had that hanging off of my handlebars on my bicycle or whatever, you know. I thought it was cool, you know. Well, no,
I got a question for you though. In this shrunken head, you said it had a beard. Now, this is from an Amazonian witch doctor or whatever, or tribe.
Yes.
Was the victim? Was he also Amazonian as far as you can tell?
That's a really great question, and I'm glad you asked it. So here's the thing: the Havaro were shrinking people's heads that were typically their enemies, other tribes that they were feuding with or something. And then what happened is, in the 1800s, you know, explorers are going through the jungle. They discover this tribe that has these shrunken heads. And the next thing, National Geographic has got a story on this stuff. You know, back in we're talking 1800s or early 1900s. These stories come out to the public. You got explorers that go down there to see. Some of them, some British explorer heads off with you know, on this exploration to meet the cannibals and the headhunters, and they never hear from them again.
Right. Yeah.
So then what happens is a tourist trade happens where they start, you know, you got Europeans coming looking to buy and purchase these shrunken heads and trade for guns and so forth, right? Now, this is part of the history. So then, sadly, what happens is people get murdered and their heads get shrunk just to trade so they can get some weapons, or, you know, it becomes a thing. Well, eventually that becomes illegalized, you know.
Okay.
But for a period of time there, you know, but, you know, whatever goes down in the Amazon jungle, you know, and to this day, years ago, I ended up traveling through Peru, heading up into the Andes mountains to study real mummies, which was an incredible trip. But while we were down in the Amazon area, they were like, we got to get through here fairly quick. This is a very dangerous area. There are a lot of indigenous people, and then there's loggers, and there's drug runners and so forth. And I didn't want my head to get shrunk, you know. So yes, let's get out of here, man. If these hardcore road warriors I was traveling with are saying this is a dangerous place, get me out of there, please. I don't want to end up on somebody's necklace with my soul trapped, you know.
Yeah, I'm not much for jewelry. They need a really big neck for my head.
No, I mean, I would be an ugly shrunken head. But like you say, here's this shrunken head that has a beard.
Right.
And so I cannot help but wonder that this was probably some person traveling through this area, ended up becoming a souvenir for somebody, you know. And that is horrific.
It is. And I'm chuckling, but I'm also like shivering as I'm chuckling, because it's like so unusual and such a horrifying concept. It's like, if I don't laugh, I might curl up into a ball. You know, horrifying.
Now, interestingly, at this time, it is not illegal to own a shrunken head, as long as it's known to be an antique.
Oh, okay.
Now, I don't know. I think laws may have occurred where trying to, you know, ship and send things through the mail or whatever there may be some issues at the customs now or whatever. But, you know, a lot of these items have been around for 100 years or more. And, but there are people who, have elaborate collections of these, and they go for tens of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And, they got these things in their homes and so forth, so
Sure.
again, for me, I wouldn't want that, but it felt like I was, having some response from this particular one with, the meter. So, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is going to sound so far-fetched, but I asked out loud because we were filming this, and I said, and my son was involved, and he asked a couple questions, and we were, said, "Were you murdered?" And the thing went crazy, the meter,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And at one point, I said, "Can you please show us a sign that you're here and move something?" And I don't know. I was wondered, did my eyes play tricks on me or what? But this head was in a drawer, just sitting in a drawer, and it moved.
Wow.
And we caught it on camera.
Okay.
And I was like, "Did you guys see that?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, I don't know, you're like,
Yeah.
there's nothing that could have moved it. There's no wind blowing. There was nobody touching it,
Right.
and there it was, so I thought, how horrifying to think that somebody could be trapped,
Right. Yes.
stuck in a drawer,
Yep.
stuck. I don't know, it makes you think about so many things, and it is interesting, and but at the same token, it is very very frightening to realize that there are objects that intentionally have things
Attached.
placed in them, or
Yep.
and so haunted objects do exist. So yes, when you're shopping at the antique mall or whatever, you might want to bring some kind of a meter to test these things with. My wife says, "Don't you bring any," I like collecting things, but don't you bring anything in here that has any of that mojo stuff on it.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that this workplace was a busy experience for you in many number of ways, but what an incredible experience all the same. I mean, just touching all of that culture, all of that history, and working in close proximity to it, and then duplicating it for display and stuff, I think must have been incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, well, I decided to change careers somewhere along the line, 17 years later. And, I thought, well, all right, I'm going to start doing something different. And, so I ended up with another interesting job.
Mm-hmm.
And we started off it was a startup company, and we started off in a very small little space, close to where I live. And, when we, outgrew that, we moved into a new space.
Mm-hmm.
And we were very excited to have a little more elbow room. We had hired some more people and so forth. And so because I lived close by, which was a really great thing, that I did not have to commute through heavy traffic like I had for years, to have a place close to where I lived, I was excited. But the alarm company, so we just moved in. The alarm company had my number to call in case something happened. I could be the first one to get over there quickest to take care of the problem.
Right.
And so, something that I can't remember how this worked out, but when we moved in, my boss had the place blessed. Oh. She is a Catholic. She had a priest come and they blessed the place. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if that happened before or after what I'm going to get ready to tell you. I remember them coming, and I don't remember him. I was kind of went over and just avoided getting in that scene. I was doing my work or whatever. But I do, trying to set up the shop or whatever. But anyways, I do remember they came and did a blessing in the building. And I thought, wow, I've never seen that before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder, why would you do that, kind of thing. But I thought, well, I don't know, maybe she just does that anytime she moves into a place or something. It was, this is something I had never seen before. So that was new. But, anyways, one day, I think on a weekend, this is like the first week that we moved into the building, the alarm company, contacts me, and I told my wife, like, I got to go to the new shop because the alarm went off there. Something triggered the motion sensors in the building. So I drove over there, and I'm like, okay, get this alarm code thing together here, and I went into the building and I hit the alarm code, and I walked into the building. So you walk in through the front door, and there's a little small lobby space, and then you walk through that and into the center of the base of the building, and then it veers off into different offices and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I walked through that little door, and as I just was walking, only a matter of 12 feet or so, I walked right into this massive energy spot,
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I hit it, it was like a horror thing that happened to me. It was cold. All the hair stood on end. Instantly, I was covered in goosebumps, and I've known this feeling because I've had many paranormal experiences in the past, but this was extremely intense. And I backed out of it. I turned around, I punched the code back in, and I ran outside instantly. And I was sitting in my car, kind of freaked out, going, oh my God, this place is haunted,
Yeah.
And as I was sitting there, I was so disturbed that I was afraid to walk back in the building, Mm-hmm. And while I was sitting out there, the sheriff pulls up next to me. And I look over, and, I'm just had a weird experience. I'm acting suspicious, and the alarm's gone off, and here's the sheriff. And he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I work here in the alarm company. He's like, this is the second time the alarm's gone off today, and we're going to charge you the next time. And I'm like, whoa, I'm just an employee.
Yeah.
We just moved into the building. What I wanted to say is, I just had a ghostly experience. Can you go in there, officer, with me and, make sure that there's nothing in there, nobody in there or anything, but I couldn't say that. So I was just trying to go, look, I'm sorry. I will try to get the problem fixed,
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know what was going on or what the problem was, but I certainly knew at that moment that something was really wrong with inside that building.
Yeah.
And, I couldn't say that to the sheriff, or he's going to have me arrested for being under the influence or something or whatever. So he leaves, and now I'm like, do I go back in the building or not? And I did not have the nerve to go back in that building at that moment. And I went home, and I told my wife, it's haunted. The building's haunted. She's like, oh, again? Come on, really?
Again.
Yeah, here we go again.
Sure.
And so, we were there for about 5 years, and this thing knew that I knew that it was there, and it wanted my attention, or I don't know, it was always, anytime I was in there by myself, it would come over to where I was, and, it was very unnerving for sure.
Wow. That's intense. And
yeah,
just knowing that it's there, and that comes up so often. It seems like we as human beings have like a sixth sense for that. And I mean, like everybody's had those feelings like, I'm being watched. I feel like I'm being watched. And sure enough, in many cases to turn and find out, oh yeah, someone's glaring at me, and I really think that is probably one of those psychic abilities that everybody seems to have. But
yeah,
got to pay attention to it.
You're right, because I think honestly, I think that goes back to our primal days when saber-toothed tigers and things could just come up behind you and eat you, you know, that they've done studies where they've had people with a staring study, and, you know, people will get this feeling there will be somebody purposely staring at somebody in a crowd, and then the person, and I think a lot of people have experienced that, and they look and there's literally somebody staring at you.
Yeah.
So there is that. And so I knew that there was something there, and it was unnerving. And the thing that would, you know, for a long time, I didn't say anything except for to my family, you know. I mean, because I'm like, dang it, I don't want to be the crazy guy, you know. And I kept waiting for somebody to say something. It seems like my coworkers, la-di-da, nothing, everything's fine for them. And yet when I was there, and then a lot of times I would end up being there working when everybody would leave because of the nature of the stuff that I was doing. It was hard to just walk away from something when you're in the middle of making something, mixing materials or something. And or I would come in on a weekend to do some work, and you know, sure enough, walking in there, you know, you got to walk into a dark place, you know, do the code and then come into the building, and it felt uncomfortable, quite often. You know, always it felt uncomfortable. Like, just, okay, so here we are. And, you know, it's interesting that one time, and you know, a coworker, and this guy, you know, unlike me, Mr. Artist guy, you know, that, you know, hey, I'm going to listen to some Led Zeppelin tonight. You know, this guy, a very proper, you know, professional, type person, kind of came up to me and said something unusual happened to me. You know, I'm like, what? You know, I was so relieved. You know, thank you. Oh my gosh, somebody else, you know,
somebody else's turn.
And now he's reluctantly tells me that he came in the morning and felt a little something strange, and then an object flew off of the shelf in front of him and landed on the floor in front of him. And he goes, "There's no way that his logical brain, which, you know, he was a very logical person, could not figure out any way whatsoever that object was actually a picture frame on a shelf." On a, I don't know if it's sitting on a file cabinet or something, but it was in a hallway right, you know, in the place. And as he was coming through, this thing flew out in front of him and landed on the floor, and there was nothing that could have made that happen. So he felt like he could tell me, which, I may have begun indicating something to, you know, it's hard to keep your mouth shut when you're like, anybody else feeling anything weird around here, kind of thing, you know. And another thing that happened was they had a gentleman come in there that was supposed to measure out the space using his laser equipment. I don't know if he was an architect or whatever his deal was, but they were going to do some work, designing a space or something. And the guy normally, I overheard him saying something which was interesting. He says, he's like, I don't understand. He was there for hours and hours, and his equipment was just acting up really crazy. And he could not, he was using high-tech lasers to try to measure spacing. He's like, I don't understand why I cannot measure this. And he says, it's like I'm in a portal or something. And I was sitting there going, yeah, you are, you know. And I never said anything to the guy, but he was getting really upset, like, you know, what he thought was going to take him a couple hours. You know, hours later, he's still in there and still struggling to try to get what the information that he was wanting to by scanning and measuring these spaces out, which should have been an easy thing for him to do. And I also remember people saying batteries were being drained in some equipment and stuff there. Sure. So, you know, all these things start to add up to, okay, there's definitely, had no question about the fact that something was going on, but, you know, to realize it was affecting other people, that, made me feel better, you know, a little bit,
Sure.
but not a whole lot better.
Yeah.
You know.
Everyone, well, it's nice not to have to suffer alone, you know?
Yeah. You know, so there were a number of times when I ended up starting to bring in, I had a Mel meter. I had a couple of different devices that I bought because, well, I had the one that I bought, from when I worked at the other place, which was kind of a cheap thing, but it still worked. It still seemed fairly accurate actually for what it was. And then I bought a better piece of equipment, but I would set them up sometimes when I would be in there by myself, just kind of put them there. And then, once I would, of course, I didn't need the meters to tell me something was coming my way. I could feel it by just the goosebumps, you know, but, the meters would start going, or sometimes I would pick them up and walk around and track where this thing. So this energy, I checked to see about wiring. I went over to the, you know, electrical boxes and that kind of thing. But this energy moved around the place, and this thing seemed to hide during the day when everybody was in there working. It wasn't anywhere to be found, you know. But as soon as everybody left, then it came out, and so the place had a drop ceiling. Maybe it was up there. I don't know where the ghosts go when they don't want to be aggravated. I don't know. They got their places that they go. It's
sure,
or maybe they can. I don't know. It's a weird. You left so many questions and so little answer, you know, about this. But I started to say I was uncomfortable walking out of there. I had to turn the lights out and then walk to the darkness, to open the door and leave it, you know, especially during the winter months. And, you know, I would always say goodbye. And then when I would walk in, I would say hello. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be on the good side of this thing, you know, but I don't know what I'm talking to, you know, but it's kind of weird. I felt like I had a gut feeling that it was a woman.
Okay.
Now the thing is, the building that we were in was a standard business type, not a, you know, multi-storied building. It was a one-storied, kind of like a plaza setup almost, but of business offices and stuff, you know. And the place, I think, was built in the 80s. So, you know, it'd been around a little while, but it's not your typical Victorian home or a old orange juice processing plant from the 1940s. This was you know, where industrial things were going on, where people could, you know, not your kind of place that you would expect to have a ghost or anything.
Right.
Although there's a busy road out there, there could have been a tragic accident, or, you know, we don't know what was on the property before they built that building. So there's always that possibility.
Sure. Yeah. In fact, that I think is part of quite a number of hauntings. It's like, I mean, it can be new structures or newer structures, and a lot of people like to attribute activity to the age of a structure, but the land has been there forever, and who knows what happened there before the structure, you know, so it could be definitely tied to the land itself.
Yeah. So it's interesting that my son, by this time, he's a teenager, and he's interested in this stuff a bit, you know. He seems to be very level-headed when it comes to, because I'd be like, sometimes he would come to work with me, and you know, of course he knew that I told him, hey, place is haunted. Another person connected to the building, or connected to the company, told me that they felt a presence there as well. And then eventually a few other people kind of came out and said, well, while I was here, because I started just going, you know, there's a ghost here, right? I don't care anymore, you know.
Yeah.
I know you all think I'm crazy anyways, but I'm just going to say it, you know, if how it comes out, I'm just going to say it. And then, of course, people were like, I don't want to hear this. I'm not comfortable with this. Sorry, but, you know, but they would say, I was here, and the front door, the bell rang, which is, it's a locked door, so you have to put a code in and to get in through the door. And when you do come in, they would make a noise, but they would hear the noise, but nobody would be there kind of thing. Wow. They think somebody came into the building to get out and go look. Well, while I was in there, oftentimes there was one day, the most startling thing, I would see sometimes in my peripheral vision, something go past, while I was working. And I did kind of ask it, please, I don't know if telepathically I was trying to send a message or maybe I actually said it out loud, but I'm like, please don't show yourself. I mean, a lot of people going out there be like, show yourself to me. Well, when you're alone and you got to work at this place every day.
Sure.
I don't know if I'm going to see some hideous thing or what,
Yeah.
So I did not want to see it. And actually, I remember this sounds, it's embarrassing, but I'd be in there and when I'm in there by myself and I needed to go to the bathroom and I'm trying to cut through the place and I could feel something is following right behind me and all the hair on the back of my neck is standing up and I need to go to the bathroom and I get to the bathroom door. I'm like, can you please just leave me, let me go, and I'm in there trying to rush, I am totally uncomfortable with this thing. I'm like, I just want to go to the bathroom. Come on, man, give me some space here. But actually the one time I felt so uncomfortable. I went and grabbed the meter and it was off the charts in the bathroom area. I mean, it was just so off the charts that I was like, I cannot believe how strong this is here right now. But I was like, that's great. I'm going to be hesitant to go to the bathroom again, but this is the kind of stuff that I was dealing with. Now, another really weird thing began to happen. Now, while this happened, it was a time when my father had passed away too. So I was dealing with that. And then I got this working in a haunted place. So there were, it seems like the paranormal things were kind of, heightened at this point in time in my life, personal life, and in my workplace. But we were listening to on the computer, a music station. It's like I don't know. I'm trying to think of, I don't want to mention, any company. I don't know, what kind of deals you got or whatever, out there. But we were listening to one of those main streaming, platforms that people listen to.
Sure.
And where I discovered, the wonderful world of podcasting as well on there.
Oh, good.
But because I shared this room with other coworkers during the day, we had to try to find some happy medium to, one guy might want to listen to, his music. And then I got this older Spanish woman that liked to listen to, her music and stuff. So we tried to keep, and because there were offices attached to the place, we couldn't be jamming out to crazy heavy metal or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, so we would keep the radio on fairly low, and I'd try to mix it up a little bit to please people. But I mean, one day we were in there and we were just listening to some music and out of nowhere, this is so weird. Tiny Tim's Tiptoe Through the Tulips started playing, which is a very creepy
song.
I think they ended up using it in a horror movie somewhere along the line.
Yep, they did.
But, when that happened, the volume was like on full blast.
Oh, wow.
And the weird part was we were listening to a easy listening Spanish music channel at the time. And suddenly Tiny Tim's Tiptoe Through the Tulips comes on, right?
Yeah. Wow.
We all stopped and we're like staring and we're like, and kind of freaked out, like what was that all about? And then when it was over, the music went back to this happened numerous times, on different channels. Didn't matter what it wasn't like we were listening to obscure 60s strange music or anything.
Right.
Because Tiny Tim's Tiptoe, who in the world goes out of their way to listen to that? I don't know. Maybe there are probably some fans out there. When I was a little kid,
you said this happened many times. Was it the same song? Did Tiny Tim keep popping on?
Yes.
Wow. And it was louder. What?
Yeah, it was louder. Now, you probably know more about electronic stuff than I do with this stuff, I mean, I'm like, is it some kind of a, I don't know, something wrong, or somebody put some kind of virus in there or something? I mean, I've never heard of the tiptoe through the tulips virus before,
No, that's a new one for me. Yeah, generally speaking, but it's so weird because you'd have different channels on and still, yet that song would come on and it would come on like almost full blast. And then when it was done, it'd be normal again. That's very, very strange.
It is. Now, the one thing that made me think about my dad was that my father was a jokester. And I think I talked to you about him with William the Viking and the other ones. So, my dad, when I was growing up, Tiny Tim was a celebrity on the TV for whatever reason. It was a very strange celebrity thing. Yeah. 60s were a strange time and place, right? But I remember seeing him on the Ed Sullivan Show or whatever it was on TV. And they actually even had a Tiny Tim doll made back in those days. And for whatever reason, I got one for Christmas or something. And, I wish I had it now because I think it's probably a collectible item. I don't know. But it was just a really weird thing to get for a gift,
Sure.
And he played a ukulele. For anybody who doesn't know who Tiny Tim is, listen to the song, and it's a creepy thing. He sings in a high tempo, playing a ukulele with a 1920s kind of a vibe or something going on.
It is a really creepy song. Yeah.
It just would give you chills when it came on full blast at work. I mean, chills would run up your spine, and everybody that heard it got freaked out,
Right.
But I thought, is that my dad being silly? Cause I remember he would imitate him like jokingly, like, oh, tiptoe, or whatever. And, so I thought it would be my dad's quirky sense of humor or, but on the other hand, is it whatever's in this building trying to get our attention by playing something, maybe this person died in that era, or they knew that this song would stand out. Who knows?
Right.
It's just weird.
It is weird. That's a weird song. That is a weird song. Well, Barry, it's been an incredible journey. I can't thank you enough for coming back again and sharing more of your experiences with us. My God, this is absolutely epic.
Well, thanks so much. Yes. Well, it's nice to be able to share these stories. They've been in my head for years. And, when I tell them at a party, I'm usually get some people looking at me quite strangely, but not a lot of my friends, they enjoy it. But anyways, I'm glad to share it with you and with everybody listening. And thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, brother. And we'll have to get you back again because I know you've got some more stuff to get into.
All right. Well, you take care. Thank you.
You as well, sir. Thank you, and have a great day. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So hope you guys enjoyed the show, and thank you again so much for all your love and support. And remember, if you want to follow the Paranormal Portal, probably the easiest way is to head over to paranormalportal.net. And that's the homepage for the Paranormal Portal. And you'll find links to all of our different social media and sites and information about the shows, including our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/paranormalportal. Or just look for Paranormal Portal on Google or whatever search engine, and you'll find links to our social media such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So we're kind of all over the place, and we're spreading as well as we can. But anyway, thank you so much for the love and support. Y'all take care, and remember, we love y'all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. Until next time.